Hello, this is another episode of the Regenerative Design Podcast. And this week we're doing something different. I decided to change it up a bit and do every week a solo episode where I will be teaching you certain areas in my podcast about how you can make your business more regenerative, how you can have a better impact in the world, and how you can create a better regenerative business as well. So, as I want to do that, I actually want to take the opportunity today to first introduce myself because it's been over a year that we've had the podcast, and I'll talk a bit more about myself. And then, what I also want to do today is I'll go through the overview of the episodes since we've already have 27 episodes, I think. Yes, we do have 27 episodes, so this will be the 28th, and I want to walk you through the highlights of the episodes so that if you're new to the episode, you can go and, based on the information that I'll give you, you can go and listen to some of these other episodes. So that's what I want to do today to help you find a episode that suits you best. So yeah, let's kick it off with introducing myself. So my name is Mathieu Mehuis. I'm an award-winning author of the book 12 Universal Laws of Nature. And I've written this book from the idea that when we can understand how nature works, we can use that knowledge to be better in our business. We can be better at growing our plants in our garden. We can be better as a land developer. Pretty much anything that has to do with outdoor spaces, in essence, it's about everything in a way. So that when we understand how the nature works, we can use that to our advantage and get the most potential out of your land or out of your property. So that's where this book originated from. And just to give you my backstory, I grew up on a family farm. My still today, my brother and my father are farmers. And ever since I was a child, I was extremely fascinated by plants. How on earth it is possible that if you have a tiny little seed and you put it in contact with the soil, that it can grow into a magnificent plant. Like for me, that must have been between the age of 3 and 5. I was so fascinated about it because I grew up with my father on the farm, and every year in early spring, we would walk out on the field as he had just sown his field. We would walk to the middle of the field where it seems like nothing was growing. We would remove a little bit of the soil to see that the seeds were sprouting, and that always was a great sign because then the crops start to grow and it can be a good year, a good harvest. So that was I was just fascinated by that. How is that possible? Like even so that you can have food from it, but also you can have a huge tree over time. Obviously, like how on earth was this possible? And then I went on, and by the time I was 6 or 7, I had a teacher at school, and we had a small vegetable garden on our in our school. So this teacher would teach us how to seed, how to harvest, how to grow food, how to propagate, how to make cuttings, all of the stuff. So and I found it so fascinating that I came home from school and I told my parents, "Hey, I'm gonna start my own vegetable garden. Like, where can I do it? Please help me with that." And at the time, my parents were extremely busy, both with starting their own businesses. My father as a farmer, my mother had a different business, and so they said like, "No, we don't have time for it." Even on the farm, we were not growing vegetables at the time. It was mostly cash crops and cattle, so that was definitely not a priority. But I persisted, and eventually they told, "Okay, we have this small area in the back of the garden. Go and do your thing. So you stop bothering us," in a way. So I started out and I prepared my soil. My grandmother came. She helped me to prepare the soil. We put in some compost because the soil on our family farm is so hard. It's actually located in one of the areas that about 600 to 800 years ago it was still ocean. So some monks in the 12th century pushed back the ocean. They built dikes, and they removed the salt out of the soil by planting specific plants because they knew that this soil was super rich, but at the same time it's so heavy clay soil that when it rains it becomes very muddy, and when it's dry it's like concrete. So it was really tough to prepare the soil, but eventually we found out a way to kind of get it better. And then I started out growing with radishes. And radishes, if you want to start your own garden, you should start with radishes because it's the easiest thing ever to grow. You put some seeds, few weeks later, you have radishes. So I did that. I had my early wins, my early successes. A few weeks later, I had my own radishes, and I still remember it clearly that how proud I was showing it to my mother. And we had our first salad from with radishes from my own garden. That was like one of the best feelings ever. So that's where everything started. And then I thought, okay, this is kind of easy. Let's now go and grow other stuff, tomatoes, lettuce. So I got a bunch of other seeds, and I thought, like, it's so easy. So I just spread it out, all the seeds in my whole cute little garden that I had created. And at that time, I also became fascinated about design. Like, um, I found old stones on the farm that were just laying around, and I put them in a certain way that it created like a designed garden, even though it was very basic. But it was so much fun to create that, and that's where I think my fascination also for garden design came from. And then I went on, so I put all my seeds in my whole garden, thinking like super easy. I, I was also doing other stuff on the farm. I actually had my own chicken egg business. I had 12 chicken and I was selling my eggs. So after school, I would always pick up my eggs. And then it's quite funny because my brother now has a chicken egg operation as well with mobile hen houses. And yeah, you should definitely check it out. It's cool what we've been doing on our family farm. But then, so I had other things to do on the farm. And I came back a couple of weeks later thinking like I had my early success with radishes. I'll come back and it's going to be full of tomatoes, lettuce, spinach, all the good stuff. But I came back and I was devastated because my garden was overgrown by weeds, weeds that were so nasty and high. They were higher than myself. Like imagine a small child, weeds higher than himself. So I was devastated. It was like, why is this happening? Why didn't nature just help me to give the things that I want? And it's only why I'm telling you that is because it only later when I started studying, I did a bachelor degree in landscape architecture because I wanted to learn how to design gardens. I did a master degree in international landscape architecture. So that was more for bigger projects. And then later, I also, when I finished my studies, I did a permaculture design course in India. And then it started to click like the reason why I had failed at this garden operation is that I didn't understand how nature works. And then as I did my permaculture design course, it started to click. And it was mostly related that you should take care of your soil. You should cover the soil as much as possible by using mulches and other things that we're actually using on our farm today. So it's really from that early experience that I became so fascinated about gardening. I also traveled the world. I visited a lot of eco resorts, regenerative farms, and from that experience, I founded my own business. I co-founded it, and that is Palonia Landscape Architects. So in that business, we actually help people that have a property and they want an amazing, beautiful garden, but they also want to do it in a way that is ecological, biodiverse, that is good for the planet. So actually, the main reason is creating something beautiful, creating a paradise garden, but also doing it in a way that is good for nature and that is sustainable in terms of like it's manageable, it's easy to maintain. So we've got all this experience that I gathered over the years from my studies, from looking at different projects, experimenting things myself, that we now do that for other people. So yeah, that's like the done for me approach. And then I also teach people online how they can create their own garden, how they can design it, how they should build it, and how they can actually maintain it. And the last part is quite important because it's often forgotten in garden designs. So, and then I'm currently also consulting landowners and farmers how to become more regenerative, and we're applying systems in that process. And currently, I'm actually living in the Azores, in the middle of the Atlantic. It's a subtropical climate with lots of opportunities. And so, yeah, that's pretty much what I do. I'm a landscape architect by trade, but I grew up on a family farm, so I use a lot of experience from that to apply it in pretty much any project that is related to gardening, land development, regenerative farming. So that's what I do. So now, as you now understand more about what I do, if you have questions, please reach out to me. You can always message me on Instagram, or you can send me an email. And now, what I want to do in the second part of this episode is to go through the highlights of the past episodes. So the podcast has been going on for over a year, which is pretty amazing. And I had some really, really interesting guests on. So I want to give you the overview of the guests that came on so that you can go to that specific episode and listen to it. So the Regenerative Design podcast, I kicked it off with Raymond Aaron, a New York Times top 10 best-selling author, who is also the publisher of my book. And we had a really cool conversation about how AI can help us to be more regenerative, which is a very important topic that I'll probably be talking about in one of the next solo episodes. Because when you know how to use AI, you can become more efficient, you can become more regenerative. So if you want to know more about why AI is so important, go and listen to that episode. And then in the second episode, we had Henry Gordon Smith on. So he is an expert in vertical farming, and so yeah, it was really cool to have Henry Gordon on, Henry Gordon Smith on. So, and his business is the agri-texture. So he really focuses on making vertical farms more efficient and make them work, because there's a lot of fuzz and buzz about vertical farming, indoor farming. It's like kind of a trend, or it has been a trend for many years. But as people are so hyped about it, a lot of projects fail. So he's really helping the industry of making projects in that area work. So it was really cool to have him on. So definitely go check it out if you're interested about vertical farming. And then in the third episode, we had someone else on that was also really interesting. So it was really about how you can actually. So that episode, the third episode, was about the power of film. So in this episode, I actually interviewed Manny Baines. He's an award-winning director. And you might be wondering, what does that have to do with regenerative design or regeneration of our planet? Well, he's the director of the movie that I'm featured in, or that I'm starring in, that just recently has also received an award. So the movie is called The Cure, an Inside Job, and it has won an award at the Cannes World Film Festival. So in France, it won an award for a specific area. I think it was about health and wellness, because that's what the movie is about. So this movie that was created by Manny Baines, that is featured in episode 3, is really about, okay, we have a world where we see so many problems with health. Cancer is rising, all these modern diseases, diabetes, and we are finding it like the film really tries to show you how health and wellness is an essential part of our life, and everybody wants to be healthy and everybody wants to be feeling good. So we go in the movie, we go through the problem statements, like our there's a lot of pollution, people are eating unhealthy. So there's different practitioners in that movie, and I'm kind of the odd fish in that pond because I'm not really a practitioner. So most people are like chiropractors, doctors, but I'm a landscape architect, and I'm covering everything that has to do with regenerative farming, regenerative gardening, how important it is for your personal health to put your hands in a healthy soil, how it impacts your life, how you feel better when you start gardening. So if you want to know more about the movie, you can listen to episode 3. Then in episode 4, we have another topic around vertical farming. This is an episode called Urban Harvest with Alexander van Deun, who has a business that is growing strawberries. indoors. So it's really cool to talk about that because now if you can grow strawberries indoors, you can actually produce it in areas that is difficult to produce. So for example, in Canada where it's super cold in winter or in extreme climates that are super dry, in to avoid having to import the strawberries or even have them flying in, we can have indoor farms to supply local communities with strawberries in this case. So if you want to know more about indoor strawberry growing, go and check that out. The episode 5 is with Nancy Ortenau, indoor and outdoor farming. So there again, it's kind of still we kind of kicked off the podcast with mostly focusing on innovations in indoor farming. And Nancy has her own business in tower farms. So these are like towers, and it's hydroponics. So it's working on water. It's a very easy, simple system, and she helps people set those farms up for themselves, like small if you want to do it in your home, or if you want to set up bigger um, farms. Yes. Episode 6 is with Dr. Jessica Dupont, who is a health specialist. So we really dive deep again into the health aspect. She has tremendous research on how most of the chemicals that are in our environment are affecting our personal health, and how our diets are affecting our personal health, and how we can actually solve it. It has a lot to do with gut health, and I like to include those topics as well because our personal health is also part of creating a regenerative future. Because when we can produce regenerative food, which is good for the planet, as a side effect, it's also good for our personal health. So it's really interesting when you go into regenerative farming, regenerative designs. There's so much, like you're trying to solve one problem, but then as a side effect, you're also solving so many other problems. So that's why I'm so passionate about this. And that's why this episode is very interesting to talk more about health. Then we have episode 7, which is my personal favorite. So on that episode, I have Owen Goltz on, and the episode is called "Water Is Life." And Owen is a farmer in Canada that is so knowledgeable and has all these kind of nature-based innovations. So in a way, it's systems that have been working for millions of years, but he figured them out and he found out how he can use them to become a better farmer. So we talk about farming, how pretty much the industrial revolution created an industrialized food system, and how that actually is still depleting our soils, which is a threat to our society. Because if you destroy your soils, then it's going to have a huge impact on health and society, which is currently happening. But if we can grow food regeneratively, what Owen is doing, then it's so much better. And his episode is just so inspiring and so grounding as well, in the way that he has all this knowledge that he has applied on his own farm, and he has people that come to his farm with stage 4 cancer and start eating his food, and because it's so healthy, they kind of heal from it, or at least they're stretching their life way longer than what people would expect. So it's definitely my favorite episode about regenerative farming. He's talking about some crazy things that he came up with something that is called wood vinegar and biochar. Like biochar is starting to become more known. So biochar is in essence you're burning wood at a low temperature without oxygen. So, and what it does, it creates some properties. When you then mix it into the soil, it enhances the soil health so much, and it can actually detoxify soils. So, and then a side product from the biochar, that is actually liquefied smoke, because your biochar installation will create some smoke, and if you can liquefy that, then you have a product called wood vinegar. And this is a liquid that it's when use it in your garden, you spray it on your plants, you use it to help germinate your plants faster. You can see crazy results. I've even put a video on my YouTube channel, where you can see what crazy results it has. Like plants are growing 10 times faster, 10 times as good, and it's purely nature based. And what we figured out as I was interviewing him and I visited his farm, because he's also featured in the movie The Cure. So, by the way, if you want to watch the movie The Cure, you have to go to the website and you can watch it online there. So, go to the website www.thecuredocumentaryfilm.com, or just Google it, and then you can watch the movie there. Uh, Farmer Owen is also featured in it, and we're showing some really cool stuff in that movie about farming. So, but the wood vinegar that I was talking about and why it's so important is that in nature, okay, today we have wildfires, and wildfires are also a natural phenomenon. Obviously, today we have way too much wildfires. If we look at the recent things that have been happening in LA, in so many places on the world, there's wildfires happening. Often they're also man-made, but even in nature, before humans had such a big impact on nature, the wildfires would occur just because it's too hot, or or something happened that a fire started. And when that happens, what it does is that it sets free smoke into the atmosphere. And then what they discovered, or Owen discovered as well, that in the last 2 years there was a big fire in Canada, and there was a lot of smoke moving over to New York and to Toronto. You might remember some images of like New York looking completely in a golden smoke, which is kind of a apocalyptic image. But that smoke that also came over to his farm, it's when it reached his farm, it started to rain down. And what he saw is that when the rain came down, the the plants were growing so much faster after it. Even in the next week or two, trees were making new shoots. So it's a kind of a way that nature is able to recycle itself, and that the energy that was lost through the fire is now in the atmosphere as smoke, and then it rains down, and it gives a signal to existing plants to grow more, to grow faster, because there has been a wildfire. So it's creating balance again. So from that knowledge, he uses this wood vinegar to stimulate plant growth and to signal to plants like it's okay to grow faster now. So it's really, really interesting. So if you want to know more about that, definitely go and watch that episode. Then in episode 8, I have Jeff Kramer on. He's about sustainable solutions for global water and food security. So he's like an inventor who's coming up with some crazy inventions how to um, harvest in a way sustainable energy, because energy is abundantly available. There's wind, there's cold, there's warm, there's so much energy around us, but it's more about like how can we capture that energy. And he has some really cool inventions and technologies to harvest more energy, or to also make it usable more, to make it more usable. Then we had episode 9, Ryan Cullen. He's a market gardener. So, market gardening is really about small scale food productions that you can sell vegetables locally in a regenerative way, and you can actually really create a good business from it. So, he's been working with Jean Martin Fortier, who's more known in that space as a market gardener. So yeah, it's quite interesting if you would say like I'm considering to start growing my own food and even making a business out of it, or starting my own small regenerative vegetable farm. Go and listen to episode 9. Then on episode 10 we had Kate Faddis, again from Canada as well, and she is an expert in policy making about global soil health to create a more sustainable world. So she's working for some institutes in Canada. So if you want to learn more about how institutes are also creating a better world, then definitely go and listen to that. Episode 11, Sam Eric Rutman. He is a hospitality expert. So even in my own business, we're working in some hospitality project, hotels, eco resorts, and he's a long expert in that. And I wanted to get his advice on why it is important for the hospitality industry to focus on creating unique, sustainable, ecological spaces. So we're really talking about that and how to apply it in the hospitality industry. And that brings us also to episode 12, where I interviewed Celine Vadam, who is a wellness and hospitality expert. So she's helping people globally around the world to set up their hotels, to make unique hotels that are different than what's currently already available. So she has even worked with the Four Seasons. So she's like a hospitality designer in that sense. So she really helps her clients from A to Z how to set up hotel businesses, eco resorts. So that's also interesting. Then we have Ernest Furtado, episode 13. He's working in the real estate industry and how sustainable developments can help. So then we had episode 14, Guy Gillingham. He's the one of the co-founders or co-owners. He's not the co-founder of On Its Sciences, which is a biostimulant product. So if you want to know more about biostimulants and his story, go and listen to that. Then we have episode 15. That's definitely one of my other highlight episodes with Jeremy McLeod. He's an architect from Australia who is really focusing on sustainable architecture and how he can build projects that have a, a way less, a way better impact on the environment. So decreasing the footprint, using local materials, coming up with really interesting new designs that can help people to live more sustainably and to also make it affordable because he's been doing that with his business. He also has a non-profit where they're actually developing buildings in Australia because there's a high demand or there's too little buildings. And so what his mission is, he wants to avoid people to go out and chop down the natural forest in Australia because they're under a lot of threat. So the way he says that it's the best solution is to make cities, or at least cities in Australia, more densely built, because oftentimes people are living on a very big footprint, and sometimes that's okay to do that. But if we can make more dense buildings in urban environments, then it makes it more affordable. We can also have more public parks that also are positive for the environment. So yeah, really inspiring story and definitely one of my highlights. Then episode 16, a bit of an odd one, but a really nice episode with Ivan Kutterbach, who has a sports brand for something that is called pickleball, and he's with his business in creating equipment for this sport called pickleball. He also wants to have a contribution on the environment. So I thought it was a really cool episode to also show that even if you're not directly in the regenerative business, or if you're not directly impacting the environment with your product or services, you could still make some changes in your business model that will help to create a greener, more sustainable and more ecological future. So really cool episode to show, like, even if you're not in that specific industry, then there's still huge opportunities to have a different edge in the market, as well as more and more consumers are now demanding that you have a positive impact on the environment. So, and then episode 17, that's also another highlight. Bill Wyatt, Biochar and Beyond. This is another amazing episode where Bill has started as a lumber. He has like 300 years of a legacy of lumber people in his family. So, and what he saw in the lumber industry in the US is that there's so much green waste. So they cut down the trees, even if it's done sustainably, and they replant the forests all the time. They have so much green waste, and those, because from cutting the wood, so you have all the wood chips and all the leftover pieces, and those materials started piling up years over years over years. And he saw like this is really becoming a problem because we can't really do much with it. There's no demand for this product. So then he decided to look into biochar, or he came across it. So now he's helping people around the world that have a lot of bio waste to use that bio waste to create biochar and other products related to, so we can then reuse that in farming or in gardening. So really interesting episode. If you want to dive deep into bigger scale biochar operations, definitely go check out episode 17. Then we have episode 18 with Nurse Ruth. And Nurse Ruth it's a really amazing story because Nurse Ruth, as the name says, she has been a nurse for over 50 years. And as she was getting to the retirement age, instead of taking her retirement, she decided to start her own business and to start building hospitals. And now she's also on a mission to start ecological developments that we're actually starting to work on together to create homes where people can of different generations can live together, and so that it becomes something that is really about elderly care, but is instead of putting our elders in retirement homes, which she tells me I can't use that word because it's an awful word, and I agree. So that we want to create multi-generational communities where people from different generations are living together, and we're building that model based on the blue zones of the world. So in the world, there's a few blue zones, and blue zones are areas where people live well over 100 years old. And so it's really interesting that we can use the science from blue zones to start now creating developments, regenerative developments, because a big aspect of the blue zones are community gardens, community events, public spaces where people can gather. So yeah, it's a really exciting episode to be inspired at, even at um, like when you finished one career, that you can still make a huge change in your career or continue growing in your business, or that it's actually never too late to start your own business, more specifically your regenerative business in this case. So, and then we have episode 19 with Louis de Jager, who is also a dear friend, and he's really a food forest specialist. He's created numerous amounts of documentaries. He has been gaining a lot of attention worldwide, even because he really focuses on making landscapes more edible. He's also a landscape architect like myself. So it's really cool to see what, if you want to listen to an episode about two plant geeks talking about plants and food forests and how we can create a more regenerative world as a landscape architect, then definitely go listen to episode 19. So then we're at episode 20, and I think this is really a very interesting episode as well with Alexander Savares, who has also a long history in the maritime industry. Already, his grandfather was building ships in Belgium, and that company continued to live on and is currently known as CMB Tech. And what he is focusing on, which is quite amazing and crazy in a way, that he wants to decarbonize the maritime industry. So global shipping in this well like the global shipping industry is one of the more polluting industries in the world, that we're shipping things across the world, um, so that we can have our Amazon packages delivered in less than a day, or how crazy it is even today how fast you can get certain things. So a lot of those things are done with international shipping, and that is has a really big implication on our environment. So he's really on a mission to decarbonize the shipping industry over time, because it's something that you can't do overnight. But he's already built some ships that are running on hydrogen and ammonium. So if you really want to know more about his business, he's the CEO of the company. And yeah, that was a really interesting and inspiring episode as well. Then episode 21, Parker Condit. He's a health specialist. He's a personal trainer, and he's also using regenerative principles in his business as to how you can be more regenerative as a health coach. And he's actually he was also or he is one of my clients. I actually taught him the whole regenerative design uh, notion. So I really explained in a program that I have, I really taught him like, okay, what does regenerative design mean? Like it's really a buzzword today, but it seems like it's becoming this word like sustainability or green. that everybody's now starting to use. But what does it actually mean, and how can you really create a regenerative farm, a regenerative business? Like, what are the principles? What is it based on? So I was teaching him that, and then he came onto my show to talk about that experience, and also how he's now coaching people around the world based on a lot of the things that around health and wellness. Obviously, it's exercise and all those things, but also in food, and how we can actually help to have more regenerative food being consumed, because that has a huge impact on the future of our planet. Then we're nearly at the current episodes, but we still have a few left. So then I had Matthew Lesko on. He's an expert in the US for finding grants, because in the US there's many grants for certain projects. Like if you want to start a community garden, if you want support even to find local plants for free, or you're looking to get subsidies for certain projects that you want to work on. He has actually a business that helps people to find those grants, and it's very affordable. So if you want to know grants in the US, to help start your project, then you can listen to that. And then I had Lee Stewart on, who is transforming sustainability into business success. So as there's a growing demand of like, okay, people need to be more sustainable, any business pretty much has to start doing that. And a lot of businesses are overwhelmed with that. Like, how do you actually do that, and how do you do it efficiently, and how can you actually make it a opportunity rather than like something you have to do and that becomes an expense in your company? How can you actually use the fact that we need to be more sustainable, we need to be more greener? Like, there's no way around it. If you're not thinking about that in your business, you'll become way less competitive, because it's like something you really have to do. There's several reasons. Legally, there's implications, but also like consumers are demanding it more and more, as I explained before. So if you want to know how to make your business more sustainable, go and check that out. Lee Stewart from Australia. And then we have Bert ter Hart, also from Canada. We had a really cool and long conversation about a lot of things. He's a sailor who has sailed the world, who has sailed around the world, and he's been doing a lot of research on the maritime health of our planets. And then we talk about how that has an impact globally. So if you want to know more about the oceans, the health of the oceans, and why that is such an important topic, you can go and listen to that episode. And then we have episode 25. So we still have 25, 26, 27. And then we'll wrap it up. So episode 25 is about really about creating a world that is more sustainable. So it's an episode where I interview someone who is a leading expert in regenerative sustainable developments. So that's really an interesting episode as well. And that, yeah, this is with Frédéric Pouillot, who is the CEO, which he calls not chief executive officer, but the catalytic enabling officer of JPEG's group, a group that is focusing on numerous regenerative and sustainable developments around the world. And then we have episode 26, which is an episode with Brandon Barnum, who is a community expert. So he's has a company where you have homeowner. His business is actually called homeownerassociation.com, HOA.com. So in America, there's homeowner associations for communities. So he's really focusing on helping homeowner associations how to engage their communities, how to build their communities better. So his that episode is really about regenerative communities, building communities that are here to last. And we talked about numerous topics, like how we can create greener communities, how can we enhance public and semi-public spaces. And then in episode 27, which is the last one other than this one, is an interview with Justin Schneider from Australia again. So we had a few people on from Australia, and that episode is really cool because Justin has a business where he produces supplements um, that are made mostly of mushrooms and are supernatural, and he's producing them in a way that is producing the highest quality supplements. And why I interviewed him, other than that he's helping to produce mushrooms, which is a very sustainable way of producing food and minerals and supplements, because other supplements might be way more chemical, is that other than the fact that he's having a positive impact on the world with that, with his company called Forests Superfoods. So it's already based on like with his supplements, we can actually plant more forest, as these mushrooms are often produced in those kind of environments if they're grown naturally. And then, but more importantly, what he's doing is with every order, that when somebody orders supplements, doesn't matter how much, for what price they ordered, he donates $1 for nature conservation. So he's helping trusts in Australia to acquire lands, so that when those lands are acquired, they can put them in a trust, in a conservation trust, so they can actually never be, when it stays in that trust, they can never be chopped down, or the trees cannot be cut down, as it's now legally part of that trust, and you can't destroy forests that are protected privately. So that's a really cool episode as well. And that's the last episode, episode 27. So yeah, I've been very excited and blessed to have all these amazing people on my podcast that are really leading authorities in creating a more regenerative and sustainable way. And that also, what I find so interesting about it is that it moves away. And that's one of the reasons why I founded this podcast, is that we are now moving away from the paradigm that our world is in such a bad state, which still it is, but we have so many opportunities and so many ways that we can actually create a healthier, a greener, more prosperous world that is still gonna, like, we're building a planet that is livable for many generations to come. So yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about. Thank you very much for listening to this episode, and we'll keep it going. Next week there will be a normal episode, and then the week after it will be another solo episode where I'm gonna be focusing on teaching you something about how to create a more regenerative future. So thank you, and see you in the next.